In April 1945, as the North Atlantic heaved under storm and fire, a British naval convoy, designated HX-928, slipped from Reykjavik's fog-covered harbour, bound for Scapa Flow. Its escort ships ran silent, their hulls blackened, their orders sealed in wax. What they carried was not munitions nor men, but something far less ordinary: captured cargo from a fallen Reich, crated under German seals marked Kehl Facility. 48 hours later, HX-928 vanished. The Admiralty called it weather, Bletchley Park called it interference, and buried inside an unmarked archive folder, under a single typed line, Operation Harbormist. The truth was quietly locked away for decades. Chapter 1. The Vanished Convoy of Operation Harbormist. On the evening of March 28, 1945, Convoy HX-928 prepared to leave the Icelandic port of Reykjavik under heavy fog and worsening weather. The convoy consisted of 8 merchant vessels and 3 Royal Navy escorts: HMS Celandine, HMS Pytchley, and HMS Godecia, all veteran corvettes from the Atlantic run. Its manifest, however, was unusual. Instead of tinned rations or ammunition, the holds contained sealed crates labelled only with Reichskommando insignia and cryptic registry marks that did not appear in any captured Wehrmacht inventory. Each crate was accompanied by 2 British officers under direct order from the Admiralty's Scientific Warfare Division, an organisation that, according to official post-war records, was dissolved in 1944. Witnesses recalled one officer repeatedly, referring to the cargo as V Propulsion Assembly, though none aboard were briefed on its contents. Among the crew was Lieutenant Harold Wainwright, signals officer aboard HMS Celandine. His personal journal, recovered years later by his son, records that prior to departure, Celandine received a coded transmission from Bletchley Park instructing the convoy to avoid standard radio frequencies and to monitor a secondary encrypted channel, designated Erebus Control. The message was signed only with the initials TH, believed to belong to Commander Thomas Henshaw of the Admiralty's Special Projects Bureau. That night, the convoy disappeared into the storm. The first sign of anomaly came 6 hours into the voyage. Merchant ship SS Bannington reported a faint sonar contact trailing at 500 yards, speed matching the convoy. It was dismissed as an iceberg echo. Shortly after midnight, the Celandine's radar operator logged a surface contact on bearing 113 degrees, stationary, size indeterminate. He noted a flicker on the cathode tube, an interference pattern resembling Morse dots. Before he could relay coordinates, static engulfed the system. The entire convoy went radio silent for the next 2 hours. When communication resumed at 0317 hours, HMS Godecia had vanished from formation. Aboard HMS Pytchley, the crew described seeing flashes of blue light beneath the surface, as though from submerged electrical arcs. Several ratings later told naval investigators that their compasses spun uncontrollably, and the sound-powered telephone line emitted high-frequency clicks akin to Morse signals, though none could decipher them. At 0420 hours, the convoy's master vessel, SS Alton Grange, transmitted a brief signal. Under observation, stop one vessel. Shadowing stop identified as Erebus stop request. Immediate air support. It was the last transmission ever recorded from HX-928, when the convoy failed to arrive at Scapa Flow by April 3, 1945. The Admiralty declared it lost to severe weather. No wreckage was recovered. Families were informed their loved ones were presumed drowned. Yet within the Admiralty's own correspondence, declassified decades later, a series of memoranda surfaced referencing post-incident security measures and containment of unauthorized intelligence dissemination. One handwritten note by Admiral Bertram Ramsay, dated April 6, reads simply, "Cargo retrieval impossible. Issue narrative of meteorological loss. Erebus classified. End correspondence." In 1974, during a sweep of decommissioned files at the Ministry of Defense Archives in Kew, researcher Peter Colby discovered a sealed folder marked Ultra Annex D9401. Inside were degraded photographic negatives, showing what appeared to be a partially submerged freighter listing in calm waters. A serial number on its hull matched the SS Alton Grange. The negatives bore date stamps from March 30th, 1945, 2 days after the convoy was reported lost. None of the ships assigned to HX-928 were scheduled for patrol that day, and no reconnaissance flights were authorized in that sector. The photographs vanished from the archive shortly after Colby's discovery, He died in an automobile accident within the year. Independent historians later pieced together fragments from naval communication logs and Bletchley intercepts. One decrypt record, labeled Erebus Protocol 12, refers to test articles compromised by magnetic disruption, a non-recoverable vessel E02. Another cites a distress beacon emanating from 60 de Grauan, 10 de Gaulle, the heart of the Atlantic Gap, a region infamous for sonar distortion and failed signal triangulation. A 1983 trawler crew operating near the Faroe Islands hauled up a rusted steel container marked with partially legible stenciling. Reichskommando Kiel, Gerät 47. Inside were brittle fragments of metal latticework, melted glass, and the remains of a burned logbook written in both English and German. The pages that survived mention repeated references to drive oscillation field test and reaction threshold exceeded 3.2 MHz. The Admiralty refused comment on the find, citing marine salvage jurisdiction. Local authorities impounded the artifacts. None were publicly displayed. The trawler's captain, Henrik Lovstad, later reported being questioned for over 9 hours by men identifying themselves as members of the Royal Signals Evaluation Board, an entity that does not exist in any British defence registry. Within a month, Lovstad sold his vessel and emigrated to Canada. He was never interviewed again. In the following years, journalists and naval historians attempted to trace Operation Harbormist. The National Archives at Kew list no such operation under wartime or post-war sections. However, within the digitized transcripts of the 1946 Parliamentary Committee on Defence Science, a redacted testimony from Commander Henshaw references an incident concerning experimental propulsion transferred from the continent under naval protection. He adds that the incident remains unresolved due to complete loss of materials. His statement was struck from the final record. Survivor rumours persisted. In 1958, a fisherman out of Lerwick claimed to have found a lifebuoy marked HMS Godesha drifting near Shetland. When delivered to the local constabulary, the buoy was seized by officers from the Royal Navy's Northern Command and never returned. A year later, sonar mapping conducted by a Norwegian hydrographic team detected metallic anomalies at depths exceeding 2,800 metres near the convoy's last known route. The shapes suggested large hulls lying parallel to one another, consistent with convoy formation. Norwegian authorities classified the survey results until 2002. When released, most data had been redacted. One final lead appeared in 1991, when a Freedom of Information request compelled partial release of NavSec file 117B. It contained a single decrypted communication from April 1, 1945, timestamped 0442 hours, originating from an unknown Allied source. Erebus engaged. Stop device compromised. Stop initiating deep disposal. Stop recommend total blackout of incident. Stop. The term deep disposal aligns with naval jargon for deliberate scuttling. By the early 2000s, maritime archaeologists began searching the coordinates provided in the decrypted message. None found evidence of hulls or wreckage, yet sonar anomalies consistent with large metallic masses remain recorded along the continental shelf, buried under silt and pressure. All subsequent expeditions were denied permits due to environmental sensitivity. Today, the legacy of HX 928 endures as one of the Royal Navy's enduring mysteries. No memorial exists for the 316 sailors and civilians who vanished. The few surviving documents reference a classified research initiative involving captured German propulsion experiments, possibly tied to the rumoured V7 series. Whether those crates held engines, weapons, or something else entirely is unknown. What is certain is that somewhere beneath the grey Atlantic, the last remnants of Operation Harbormist rest undisturbed, their secrets sealed by water, pressure, and 70 years of official silence. Chapter 2. The Vanished Convoy of Operation Harbormist. By 1946, with Europe divided between victors and occupation zones, the file marked Operation Harbormist had all but disappeared, yet traces remained, buried inside routine naval memoranda, stray index cards, and the recollections of a handful of men who refused to forget. Chief among them was Lieutenant Harold Wainwright's widow, Margaret, who never accepted the Admiralty's explanation that her husband's ship had been lost in severe weather. When she pressed for more, she received a letter stamped Most Secret and signed by Rear Admiral H.G. Tennant, warning her that further inquiry could compromise post-war intelligence security. The letter's tone was neither sympathetic nor vague. It was final. But Margaret persisted. In 1952, she contacted a journalist with The Times, Robert Fairley, who had covered wartime operations for the Ministry of Information. Fairley gained access to Bletchley Park's now partially declassified archives, where he uncovered an intercept file referencing Operation Erebus. According to the log, the term was used in 3 separate transmissions between March 27 and March 30th, 1945, all classified under Naval Ultra Confidential. 2 messages originated from an American relay station in Londonderry, one from a Royal Navy office in Plymouth. Fairly suspected Erebus referred to an unidentified vessel, possibly Allied, but operating outside regular command structures. Fairley's investigation took him to Plymouth, where he found an aging naval technician named Cyril Dawes, who had served aboard HMS Pytchley. Dawes remembered the night the convoy vanished. "The sea was like nothing I'd seen before," he told Fairley in a recorded interview later obtained by the BBC. "It was calm 1 minute, then the radar went blind, like the screen was being erased. The captain ordered all lights extinguished. Then we saw something off the port bow, blacker than the water. It didn't move, didn't float, just was." When Fairley asked if it could have been a U-boat, Dawes reportedly laughed. "A U-boat doesn't glow under the waves, does it?" Dawes died 2 months later, officially from heart failure. His home was ransacked. His tapes were missing. The police report listed burglary with unknown motive. By 1961, Fairley's notes had grown into a manuscript titled The Lost Convoy, Secrets of Harbormist. Before publication, he was visited by 2 plainclothes, men who identified themselves as representatives from defense. Intelligence. They confiscated all his papers under the Official Secrets Act. Fairley was charged briefly with unauthorized possession of restricted materials, though charges were dropped. His book never saw print. The only surviving evidence of Fairley's research is a microfilm copy of a single page from the Bletchley Park intercepts, preserved in the private collection of historian Dr. Elsie Rayner. The text reads, "Convoy HX928 in contact with E-class vessel. Erebus stop magnetic interference detected stop. Recommend cessation of radio and optical transmissions stop." A final annotation in pencil adds, "Cargo integrity compromised." Rayner, now retired, described the document as a smoking gun hidden in plain sight. When she presented her findings at a maritime history conference in Oslo in 1987, representatives from the British Embassy reportedly asked that her session not be recorded. The following year, the British Ministry of Defence released a sanitized version of naval archives from 1945 to 1946. The section containing Convoy HX928 was missing, decades, passed before technology caught up with rumour. In 1998, deep-sea imaging company Bathy Serv Ltd conducted a sonar mapping project for the North Atlantic Treaty Organization. Among thousands of routine scans, one anomaly stood out: a dense metallic echo resembling a shipwreck at approximately 3,700 meters. Coordinates placed it near the last known route of HX928. The discovery was logged as Target Echo 22 Black. A subsequent NATO report classified the data under Oceanographic Secrecy, Level 3. When Bathy Serv's chief technician leaked a copy of the scan to a maritime journal, he was immediately dismissed. 2 years later, an independent expedition led by Norwegian explorer Jens Eriksen attempted to locate the wreck. Using remotely operated submersibles, Eriksen's team descended to 3,500 meters. Their logs describe unnatural magnetic distortion and malfunctioning camera feeds. The ROV captured a few seconds of video before losing signal. The recovered footage, grainy and overexposed, shows what appears to be a steel hull split open along its centerline, with a series of cylindrical structures stacked like reactor coils. The hull bears faint markings. HMS Celandine. Eriksen's footage was confiscated by the Norwegian Coast Guard within 48 hours. He was told the location was a restricted zone due to submarine communications cables. Yet cables in that sector were decommissioned in 1984. In 2007, a classified audit within the British National Archives declassified 3,000 post-war naval documents. Buried among them was a requisition order from March 1945. Authorized use of Convoy HX928 for transport of classified scientific equipment and personnel. under code designation Harbormist. Cargo sourced from Kale Facility, Baden-Württemberg. Escort priority, maximum secrecy. Attached was a technical appendix referencing V7 Aero, experimental drive and oscillating propulsion array. No follow-up documents describe what became of the shipment after departure. The Kale facility itself, located on the banks of the Rhine, was known during the war for developing high-frequency radar jamming systems and early jet propulsion designs. When Allied forces captured it in early 1945, most records were burned. But an OSS field report dated March 17, 1945, notes several metallic canisters, heavily shielded, emitting residual magnetic field, shipped north for immediate trans-channel transfer. That shipment's manifest bears identical crate numbers to those later assigned to HX 928 by cross-referencing OSS. RAF and Admiralty files, modern researchers have proposed that the convoy was transporting captured German technology of unknown type, possibly electromagnetic, propulsion systems the Nazis had experimented with under the umbrella of V weapons. The secrecy surrounding the operation suggests that both the British and Americans were eager to secure these devices before Soviet intelligence could. But what of the vessel Erebus? The Royal Navy's records list a Monitor-class ship named HMS Erebus, launched in 1916, which served until being scrapped in 1946. However, logs show it was stationed in the English Channel during March 1945, hundreds of miles from Iceland. Yet several radio intercepts and decrypted reports refer to an Erebus-class experimental escort operating under Admiralty special projects. No blueprints or hull numbers exist for such a vessel. Those who study Operation Harbormist believe Erebus was a cover name for a clandestine test craft, possibly equipped with the very propulsion system HX 928 was transporting. The convoy's disappearance, then, may have been the catastrophic failure of that same technology, tested prematurely at sea. In 2016, the British Maritime History Review published a rare interview with retired Commander Lewis Barr, who had served as a communications officer for the Admiralty in 1945. Barr, at 96, recalled seeing a classified telegram reading, "Erebus trial unsustainable, stop immediate containment impossible, stop operation terminated stop." When asked what containment meant, Barr hesitated. "Not radiation," he said, "something magnetic, something that made compasses mad." The sea is a patient archivist. Storms erase and reveal in equal measure. The Atlantic gap, stretching between Iceland and Scotland, has swallowed countless vessels. Yet among those lost to its depths, few have drawn such scrutiny, such whispered unease, as the vanished convoy HX 928. In the cold arithmetic of war, a dozen ships are small sacrifices, but in the unseen margins of history, their disappearance may mark the moment when science and secrecy crossed a threshold neither side understood. To this day, divers, archivists and historians chase the echo of that final transmission. Under observation, one vessel shadowing, identified as Erebus. What shadow followed them and who gave it orders remains a question the Atlantic refuses to answer. Chapter 3: The Vanishing of Operation Ebon Flame. By 1957, 12 years after Germany's surrender, the echoes of Operation Ebon Flame had all but faded from official history. Yet in the archives of the US Air Force's Technical Intelligence Division, a pattern began to re-emerge. Analysts reviewing Cold War-era transfers of captured Axis materials noted anomalies in serial records, equipment pieces with German markings but no manufacturing plant, alloy samples that defied identification, and several references to an item labeled Fuel Element 5. All bore a small embossed symbol, a raven spreading its wings over a torch. Internal memos cross-referenced this mark with the name Kammler, though officially the SS general was still listed as presumed deceased. One such memo, dated October 14, 1957, written by Major Lawrence Enders, described specimens emitting low-level electromagnetic pulses, origin believed to be European. Enders' note continued. Containment ongoing. Material labeled EBF, consult atomic protocols. His superior, Colonel Richard W. Hale, ordered the samples transferred to Sandia Base, New Mexico. What followed was a chain of custody, so fragmented it seemed designed to dissolve accountability. Each transfer ended with a red stamp, returned for further evaluation. Yet none of the materials were ever logged as destroyed or retained. To this day, the paper trail stops at Sandia. In 1960, the Soviet Union launched its own investigation into what it believed to be the Western acquisition of German field energy technology. GRU file GR 2549, later released to German historians in the 1990s, outlined an alleged convoy recovered near the Oder River in 1945, identified as the same one that carried Ebon flame assets. Soviet engineers under Colonel Kuznetsov were ordered to dismantle what remained of the vehicles. Within hours, 2 of the technicians fell ill, their skin turning grey and blistered. Radiation tests, using crude wartime instruments, showed readings too low to explain the burns. Kuznetsov's report concludes simply, "Unknown mechanism of contamination. Recommend total burial." Soviet forces sealed the site and later detonated a charge to conceal it beneath tons of earth. No official acknowledgement of the event was ever made. Meanwhile, across the Atlantic, small details surfaced that suggested the Americans knew more than they admitted. In 1963, a classified directive known as Defense Research Annex 12U listed an energy containment artifact, source, European war recovery. It was categorized under energy conversion, non-fissionable, and assigned to the Nevada test site. The directive included an annotation in pencil, origin unknown, link to EBF series probable. Only one photograph survives from that file, a grainy image of a metallic sphere suspended in a containment frame, its surface engraved with patterns resembling circuit lines. A caption, nearly illegible, reads, "Recovered object showing sustained internal luminescence, cold to touch." Eyewitness testimony supports this. A declassified oral interview from 1971 with Dr. Karl Hoffmann, a German-born physicist brought to the US under paperclip, recalls an incident at Wright Field in late 1946. Hoffmann described being shown a metal cylinder unlike any known prototype. It emitted a faint vibration and gave off a blue light when cooled below freezing. When he asked where it came from, the American officer replied, "From a train Kammler sent west before Berlin fell." Hoffmann was ordered to sign a non-disclosure agreement, which remained in effect until his death in 1979. Further evidence emerged during the 1980s, when Polish construction crews unearthed concrete bunkers near Görlitz while clearing land for a housing project. Inside were the remains of 2 trucks buried nose down, their cargo bays collapsed by detonation. Recovery teams found fragments of reinforced glass tubing fused with scorched copper. The discovery briefly made local news before the site was sealed by military police, citing unexploded ordnance. Yet local workers recalled officials removing small lead-lined boxes from the wreckage, boxes marked with the stylized raven and the number sequence 45EFB. A week later, the entire area was fenced off and designated a contamination hazard. No public statement was ever issued. In 1998, the German historian Ulrich Decker obtained access to portions of the Bundesarchive's restricted Cold War collection. Among the redacted entries, he found a letter from 1946, written by an American officer attached to the Combined Intelligence Objectives Subcommittee. It referenced a transfer of experimental plasma power material from an SS facility in Lower Silesia to US custody. The codename given to the transport, Ebon flame. Decker attempted to publish his findings, but his manuscript was blocked under the National Security Cooperation Clause between Germany and the United States. 2 years later, Decker's home was burglarized. His notes and photographs were taken, but nothing else was touched. Even more perplexing are the fragments found in the Soviet successor archives after 1991. Russian researchers uncovered a small box labeled EBF material, do not open without clearance. Inside were metal shards with an unusually high density and traces of synthetic mercury compounds. The Russian Ministry of Defense quickly reclaimed the materials, but laboratory notes taken before their seizure described them as self-organizing at molecular scale when exposed to electrical charge. Western analysts dismissed these observations as translation errors. Yet the terminology, self-organizing, appeared decades earlier in Kammler's personal research proposals, describing energy matrices that could sustain reaction without loss of fuel mass. By the early 2000s, Operation Ebon Flame had become the subject of scattered academic interest, though the evidence remained elusive. In 2003, a researcher named Dr. Elena Kraus discovered microfilm reels within the NATO archives in Brussels, labeled simply EBF transmission logs. The reels contained wartime communications between SS engineers referencing a containment breach in April 1945. One message dated April 22nd reads, "Flame unstable. Cooling failed. Immediate transfer to Western custody per K directive." If authentic, this would indicate the operation's purpose was not to hide or preserve technology, but to offload something too dangerous for the collapsing Reich to control. Krauss's findings briefly circulated within historical circles before disappearing into institutional silence. When she presented her data to an academic symposium in Munich in 2005, her presentation was interrupted by legal representatives citing unauthorized access to restricted material. She resigned her post within weeks and left Germany. Her current whereabouts remain unknown. What connects every trail, every erased file, every whisper of ebon flame is the unmistakable effort to suppress rather than explain. The mission's manifest, marked EBF 645, surfaces in 3 distinct archives, American, Soviet, and German, each with pieces missing in identical places. Names redacted, coordinates blacked out, technical descriptions truncated mid-sentence. Historians who analyze the redactions note their uniformity. It's as if all 3 nations censored the same content according to a shared template. Whether the operation involved nuclear research, magnetofluid experiments, or something far stranger is secondary to the pattern it established. Total convergence of secrecy between former enemies. For the first time in modern history, rival powers agreed to hide a common discovery. If the object known as ebon flame truly existed, then its purpose, whatever it was, transcended ideology. Its handlers may have changed uniforms, languages, and allegiances, but their silence remained unbroken. The trail ends not with a revelation, but with a phrase found scrawled on the last surviving field log recovered near the Elbe. Flame contained. Custody ensured. No further transmission. Chapter 4. The Iron Forest beneath Pripyat Ridge. By the time the Soviet Union fractured in 1991, Sever-9 was already an open secret among intelligence circles, though few dared to put its name on paper. The KGB had buried the site under 6 layers of bureaucratic obfuscation, classifying it first as a meteorological station, then a decommissioned research shaft, then, most absurdly, as a wine storage facility for the Ministry of Agriculture. The labyrinth of falsehoods succeeded for nearly half a century, until a single photograph escaped the archives. The image, printed on fading Ilford stock, showed a concrete corridor collapsing into shadow. A rusted sign in German read, "Vorsicht Hochspannung," Caution, high voltage. The photograph was mailed anonymously to Pravda journalist Leonid Yermolov in 1993, along with a note that read only, "Sever-9 was never decommissioned." Yermolov traced the postmark to Kiev, but the sender was never identified. Within 6 months, Yermolov disappeared while traveling the exclusion zone for a documentary series on the Chernobyl aftermath. His camera crew found his Geiger counter crushed and melted near a sealed shaft on the North Ridge. His body was never recovered. A decade later, in 2003, the Ukrainian State Committee on Nuclear Regulation granted a temporary permit to a joint Ukrainian-French research team to survey anomalous radiation levels in the Pripyat region. Among them was Dr. Sophie Delatour, a nuclear physicist specializing in electromagnetic resonance fields. Using drone-mounted sensors, her team recorded localized bursts of gamma radiation in rhythmic pulses, each lasting 1.2 seconds, repeating at 5-minute intervals. When plotted, the emissions formed a perfect circular pattern centered directly over the coordinates of the old Sever-9 installation. It behaved like a heartbeat, Delatour later recalled. Not decay, but an active cycle. Something still operating. Attempts to drill or insert remote sensors into the tunnels failed. Within 20 meters of the surface, magnetic interference disabled all instruments. Compass needles spun wildly. Digital readings froze. The drill bit of one rig snapped clean in half without visible cause. On the 10th day of the survey, a series of ground vibrations forced the team to withdraw. Local seismographs registered the event as a microquake, yet no tectonic fault existed in that area. Delatour's report, submitted to the Ukrainian Ministry of Science, was classified the following year under National Infrastructure Security. Meanwhile, documents surfaced from the former East German Stasi archives, referencing a 1963 intelligence exchange with Moscow labeled Project Urstrom Rückführung. The file described shipments of heavy machinery from Magdeburg to Pripyat Ridge, machinery resembling magnetic field generators and plasma conduits. One Stasi analyst wrote in the margin, "Purpose unknown, possibly reconstruction of German device captured 1945. The shipments ceased abruptly in 1965, the same year the Soviets began drafting plans for the Chernobyl power complex. Some researchers have suggested that the choice of location for Chernobyl was no coincidence. Geological surveys from 1971 show that the foundation for reactor number 4 intersected with an ancient subterranean passage, possibly one of Sever-9's auxiliary tunnels. This overlap might explain why, during the 1986 explosion, the fallout plume exhibited unpredicted vectoring, drawn, as one declassified Soviet physics memo put it, toward magnetic strata inconsistent with natural geology. In plain terms, the blast energy followed invisible lines buried beneath the Earth, as though responding to a dormant electromagnetic grid. After the disaster, the Soviet Civil Defense Corps dispatched a classified recovery team to the exclusion zone under directive. Operation Gneiss. Their objective, secure anomalous equipment from sub-level sectors near Pripyat Ridge. Of the 20 men sent, 17 developed acute radiation burns without direct reactor exposure. One survivor, Corporal Yuri Vasnetsov, gave a closed interview in 1992 describing metallic rooms without heat, but humming like aircraft engines. His testimony was dismissed as hallucination, yet his burns were measured as non-thermal, consistent with electromagnetic induction, not fire. Western intelligence took notice. In 1994, the CIA's Directorate of Science and Technology commissioned a classified review titled Soviet Anomalous Sites, Case File PR-47. Its findings, leaked to the Washington Post in 2010, mention an underground reactor-type installation of non-nuclear origin, possibly tied to German wartime field resonance experiments. The report concludes that continued energy emission from sub-level 5 suggests partial reactivation during the 1986 Chernobyl incident. If Sever-9 was indeed active, if some fragment of its system reignited during the meltdown, its purpose remains uncertain. Declassified German documents from 1940 Reference Energiequelle Urstrom, primal current source, and outline designs for directional plasma acceleration rings, scholars have speculated that the Ahnenerbe's scientists were experimenting with magnetic vortex generation, technology decades ahead of its time. Whether these claims represent physics or delusion, the proximity between Sever-9 and Chernobyl invites grim speculation that the Soviets unknowingly built their nuclear facility atop an unfinished relic of Nazi science. Today, access to Sever-9 is forbidden. Satellite imagery shows only dense pine forest and restricted fencing, though thermal scans occasionally reveal faint heat blooms inconsistent with ambient temperatures. Locals speak of nights when the ground hums like a transformer station, and flocks of birds avoid the ridge entirely. Ukrainian emergency services maintain a permanent monitoring post 20 kilometers away, citing geological instability. Among the sealed KGB boxes held at the SBU, Security Service of Ukraine, archive in Kiev, there exists one folder labeled Delator Incident. Its contents remain undisclosed. Dr. Sophie Delator returned to France in 2004 and refused further comment. When a journalist asked her if she believed the site still functioned, she paused for a long time and said only, "The Earth remembers." If there is truth buried beneath Pripyat Ridge, it lies somewhere between war's secret technology and nature's indifference. Whether Sever-9 was an abandoned experiment, a precursor to nuclear discovery, or something older than both regimes, the forest still guards it. The pines grow over iron doors, the wind moves through broken conduits, but every compass that enters those woods still forgets where north is, as though the ground itself refuses direction. Chapter 5. The Iron Forest Beneath Pripyat Ridge. In the spring of 2012, nearly 70 years after its discovery, Sever-9 resurfaced, not through a government leak or an intrepid journalist, but by accident. A civilian drone hobbyist from Zhytomyr, Alexander Chernyak, was testing long-range aerial mapping equipment near the northern perimeter of the exclusion zone when his drone feed began picking up heavy static. Moments before signal loss, The onboard camera captured an image, a circular clearing of dead trees, roughly 80 meters across, surrounded by untouched forest. The trees within the circle were bleached white, stripped of bark, as if flash-burned. When radiation inspectors arrived weeks later, they recorded no abnormal readings. Yet compasses refused to stabilize, spinning endlessly on their axes. Ukrainian state emergency services sealed the area and imposed new environmental protection boundaries. However, satellite imagery from the same period revealed small convoys of military trucks approaching the site under night cover. A Freedom of Information request filed by investigative journalist Andriy Koval returned a terse response. No such site registered. Koval's apartment in Kiev was burglarized 2 days later. His hard drives were destroyed. What happened in that clearing may have been another containment operation. Documents declassified by the US Defense Intelligence Agency in 2021, titled USSR Underground Facilities, 1979 to 1987, describe an unidentified magnetic anomaly 24 kilometers west of Chernobyl. The report includes a single satellite infrared photograph showing faint concentric circles emanating from the ridge. The analyst's note reads, "Source appears artificial, possibly residual energy from unknown installation. Recommend deep seismic evaluation." There is no record of any follow-up. Still, fragments of first-hand testimony continue to emerge. Former Ukrainian Army engineer Captain Dmytro Horbenko, interviewed in 2017 for an unpublished oral history project, recounted overseeing the installation of underground fiber lines near Pripyat Ridge in 1995. "We drilled into concrete," he said. "Old wartime, at least. The layer below was metallic. We heard knocking, rhythmic, like machinery through stone." He ordered the crew to stop. Hours later, they were told by military police that the dig had reached a restricted zone of historical importance. Other accounts paint a darker picture. In 2018, a declassified French intelligence memo from 1955 surfaced, referencing correspondence between Soviet physicist Mikhail Tamm and French scientist Louis de Broglie. Tamm wrote cryptically about a German field generator near Pripyat still unexamined, describing a ring system capable of inducing momentary gravitational delay. Though the authenticity of the letter remains disputed, its existence reinforces the notion that Soviet physicists had not only known of 7-9, but studied it long after the war. When historians compare the 7-9 layout to German plans recovered from the Ahnenerbe Institut für Wehrtechnische Forschung, the similarities are striking. Both depict circular underground chambers surrounded by conductor loops and turbine-like assemblies labeled magnetronen aggregate. The diagrams suggest experiments in dynamic field containment, possibly the pursuit of field propulsion or radiation-free power generation. Theoretical, yes, but consistent with the Reich's desperate attempts in 1944-45 to engineer wonder weapons beyond conventional physics. In 2020, a group of researchers from Warsaw University gained limited permission to conduct surface geophysical studies near the exclusion zone. Using ground-penetrating radar, they mapped the substrata beneath Pripyat Ridge. Their findings confirmed an extensive underground structure approximately 150 meters, deep concentric tunnels radiating from a central hub, roughly 60 meters wide. The core returned a high-density signature inconsistent with rock or concrete. The team's final report, published briefly online, concluded with the line, "Material unknown, possibly ferromagnetic alloy of pre-1945 manufacture." Within days, the report was withdrawn. The implications were profound. If the Soviets had indeed unearthed and studied such a device, perhaps reactivating it in the 1950s, it might explain several unsolved incidents in the region. Localized magnetic storms recorded in 1958, compass deviations reported by Polish aircraft in 1961, even the strange interference that disrupted NATO satellites during the Chernobyl meltdown. These phenomena, often dismissed as technical errors, match the pattern of pulsed emissions consistent with 7-9's suspected location, and yet official acknowledgement remains elusive. The Ukrainian government continues to deny the site's existence, even as they fund unexplained infrastructure projects around the ridge, reinforced tunnels, sealed access roads, and concrete ventilation shafts visible from satellite images. In 2022, an anonymous official within the Ministry of Energy, speaking under pseudonym, claimed, "Something under the ridge still generates measurable power output, though we have no connection to it." It's like a forgotten reactor that never stops humming. Forensic historians studying Soviet-era procurement records found recurring orders for lead shielding panels, electromagnetic dampeners, and dielectric suits under budget code 79 maintenance, continuing until at least 1988. These orders proved the site remained operational long after it was supposedly sealed. What was being maintained or contained remains unanswered. A persistent rumor among Chernobyl workers tells of a low-frequency vibration audible on certain nights, especially during thunderstorms. They call it Les Железных Теней, the iron shadows. It rises from the ridge and fades toward the river. Some say it is merely the echo of shifting earth. Others claim it is the same hum recorded by Soviet scientists decades earlier, the residual heartbeat of an experiment that refuses to die. Whatever 79 was, it exists at the crossroads of two tragedies: the collapse of the Third Reich and the atomic ambitions of the Soviet state. In their hunger for power, be it mystical, mechanical, or political, both regimes built machines they could not fully understand. Beneath the soil of Pripyat Ridge, buried among the pines and radiation, that legacy still breathes. No modern map marks its presence. Yet geologists, soldiers, and wanderers alike feel it when their instruments fail, when birds fly in circles, when compass needles tremble. The iron forest does not sleep. It waits, pulsing beneath the ground. And if the hum grows louder each passing year, perhaps it is not a warning, but a countdown, resuming where history dared to pause. When the last Soviet fences around Pripyat Ridge rust away, and the forest reclaims the soil that hid steel and secrets, 79 will remain beneath it, sealed, humming, and patient. Somewhere in the silence between the rustling pines, something still draws power, faint yet deliberate. The maps will continue to deny its existence, the governments will continue to redact its name, and the compasses will continue to lose their way. Whether it was science, hubris, or something neither side could comprehend, the iron forest holds the final testimony of an experiment that outlived its masters. The ridge is quiet now, but the ground still vibrates.